Ooh, welcome back. It's another season of Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. We're back. It's Jake Brown here, Mollie Walker there. Yes, a little bit of a new lineup this season. Of course, Andrew Hart's our producer along with us. We thank Ron Duguay for 3 tremendous seasons. It was a fun time last year, a fun Rangers, really unexpected season, Molly, for this young group, to even get to where they did to the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll see what this season holds, but this year it'll be me, Mollie Walker, Larry Brooks every week. We'll have your mailbag questions every week, the subtext group. The texts will be flowing through every week. Molly gets so many questions, she can't handle them all. So take it easy on her. Take it easy on us. Take it easy. Larry Brooks is going to answer your questions. So if you want to ask a question for Molly or Larry, we will be taking them. We'll give you those details as the season goes. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, wherever you get podcasts, new episodes out every Thursday, all season long. Larry's going to join us a bit later in the show to preview the 2022-2023. This year is just flying by. Season for the New York Rangers. Molly, welcome back. So nice to see your face. You don't have the rug behind you. You're a New York City resident. She's a Jersey. You can't take the Jersey out of a Jersey girl, but I can't see anyone else living in New York like you, Molly.
Aw, Jake, it's great to see you too. And it's great to be back. Everybody that I talk to at the rink, everybody laughs and says how short of an off season it was. But obviously for the Rangers fans listening, that is a good thing. The Rangers went all the way to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Final before they fell short to the not reigning anymore, back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Lightning team, who were then defeated by the Colorado Avalanche. Was a great season last season. Lots of exceeded expectations, but not to compare to the high expectations that the Rangers are now facing this season. But yeah, I don't even know where to start. I feel like, apologies, we haven't had a podcast throughout the off season, but obviously with our personnel changes, we had to get our ducks in a row a bit. But now we are back in business, ready to go. If we're going to start, we could do a quick offseason recap. By quick, I mean really quick. The Rangers lost Ryan Strome in free agency, Kevin Rooney, Tyler Mott, Andrew Kopp, Frank Vetrano, Alex Georgiev, Greg McKegg, Patrick Nemeth, Keith Kincaid, and as of late, Nils Lundqvist, who was just traded to Dallas. But the Rangers did get Vincent Trocheck to fill that number 2 center spot that was vacated by Ryan Strome. He was signed to a 7-year deal. We got Ryan Carpenter, Gustav Rydell, Yaroslav Halak, Louis Domingue, and in a way, the Rangers also got back Vitali Kravtsov and Sammy Blais. Kravtsov back from his hiatus, leaving for Russia last season after declining an AHL assignment. We'll definitely get into him in a little bit. And Sammy Blais back from an ACL tear that prematurely ended his season last year. And then Jacob Trouba was named captain. I feel like that's a good place to start. What does that mean?
It's a C. There's finally a C on a chip. Rangers. It looks like ARG, like a Pirates of the Caribbean.
I wasn't sure what you were saying or what
YMCA.
You were doing. We're going through a lot of technical difficulties. This is a real raw first episode here. I thought he was like signaling to me I need to talk less.
No, this is just a C. We're going through a lot of life difficulties, Molly. Let's just keep it 100.
I know.
It's good to finally have the C. I think, some people said, how is this not Kreider? Right. That announcement, I know we're very late to it, but is that what you expected? And do you like Jacob Trouba as the captain?
It is what I expected. I think that there were rumblings that he was going to be named captain last season. But I think a big part of why that didn't come to fruition is because it was Gerard Gallant's first season with the team. And in getting to know Gallant, I feel like he wasn't ready to make that big of a decision in his first year. And, naming a captain is a big deal. And I don't think that he was familiar with the guys, familiar with Trouba. So I think that they just deferred for a year and went with the 6 alternate captain approach, which was a huge success. From what I can remember, it really did wonders for the team dynamic and they really did buy into it. But everybody had said, last season and throughout this offseason before he was officially named captain, that Trouba was the captain without the C. And yes, to your point, I know a lot of people feel like it should have been Chris Kreider just because he's the longest tenured guy on the team, but also because of his actions as well. And I don't think the Rangers, there was no wrong answer there. They probably could have gone with either. But I feel like Trouba wanted it. And I think that's a clear distinction. I think Chris could do with it or do without it, just knowing Chris's personality. But Trouba wanted it. And, my mom actually said something to me while she was watching the preseason games recently. She said she thinks that Trouba is skating 6 inches taller with that C on his chest. And I think that is a very accurate observation by my dear mother. And I will happily put that into the existence.
Astute analysis from Wendy. Wendy's
Right.
still part of the program despite her lover not being here.
Yeah,
despite
her disappointments that her number one crush is no longer a part of it. But yes, it's true. And I totally agree with that. And I think Trouba, he's kind of a guy that did a lot of things behind the scenes for the team. He's kind of the one that's always arranging for team, activities. When Adam Fox won the Norris Trophy, he arranged with the league to have the trophy come so the team could celebrate with it. So Trouba does those little things. And I'm working on a really fun feature on him. I've talked to a lot of his old teammates in Winnipeg and Red Berenson, legendary Michigan coach, about his one season coaching Trouba. So all indications is that this is a long time coming for Trouba, and he's really matured into a real leader here, and one that I think is going to do good things for the Rangers. I also feel like the Rangers felt like they needed a captain to take that next step. I think there's been two Bruins teams, I think, who have won the cup without a captain, but every other team always has a captain. So I think that's something that they were focused on, and they really wanted to do it last season. I mean, we all remember how strict they were very assertive in saying they were going to name one, but then they just didn't. So, but I definitely think it was just because Gallant didn't really know the guys that well. But I think Trouba is going to do really well in the captain role, and he gets to talk to us a little bit more than he probably would like to now. So, but he was doing that anyway last season. So it's all
and
right.
You'll see, Molly, his captaincy and if he is the guy, because you're back. She's back in the locker room this season, where you'll get scoops like you won't get anywhere else here on Up in the Blue Seats. Molly, we'll have a weekly segment where you take us inside the locker room, maybe give us a fun little story that maybe you don't see on Twitter, maybe you don't see in a story, but you'll see it here. Exclusive. We're like page 6. We're dropping scoops here on the podcast. I know you're excited. No more of these virtual Zooms. No more of, Gallant yelling at you from the distance at a conference. He'll yell at you right to your face.
Yeah, no, it's the locker rooms being open again is just, I can't even put it into words how different it is for us, for the team too. I mean, I was joking with Keandre Miller. I was like, I've covered you for the last 2 seasons and I've never shook your hand and introduced myself to you formally. And that's a little crazy. It's just so formal, the press conference settings. And then obviously we're not even going to get into what Zoom was like. It was absolutely brutal. But a big part of what I do is developing relationships, and what a player says to me is going to be different than what he says to somebody else. And I think that's all based on relationships and familiarity and things like that. And it was a pleasant surprise coming into the locker room this season, because I feel like I had a rapport with a lot of the players, having covered them for the last 100% the last season and a little bit the season before as well. So I definitely have the leg up in being a familiar face, but lots of fun stories. Obviously, I definitely will get to do a segment every week. There will be plenty of things for me to choose from, truly, because a lot of it is, you're just shooting the shit with some of these guys sometimes, and that's no, because that's how you have to say it, because that's what it is. It's not hockey all the time, but that's also where the best stories come from. Like, I found out Vincent Trocheck's wife is a competitive horse rider. like who would find that out? How would I ever know that? And now I'm totally trying to go up to that ranch and do a whole day with his family and take pictures and all that fun stuff. So things like that. I know that Jacob Trouba asked Trocheck to go to a Harry Styles concert with him this summer. So they rocked out to Harry Styles at
Jealous.
MSG.
One of 15
Yeah.
shows.
Well, I was about to say everybody else in New York was there too as well. So yeah, just fun things like that you wouldn't be able to find out in just press conference settings. I can report that Mika Zibanejad just does the DJing stuff for fun. He's not really recording any new singles anytime soon. Artemi Panarin went to visit his grandparents in Russia this summer. I was telling him about how I was moving out into the city, and he was making jokes about how he's too old now to be partying in the city as much as I probably am. So you just really get to talk to these guys like they're normal human beings, and it really helps a lot for the job. It makes it a lot easier for sure.
And Molly, you're a pleasant person, easy for these players to talk to, I would think. So,
I try to be.
you were I didn't see you at any of the Harry Styles concerts. A little surprised. You couldn't make
No,
one of the 15, huh?
I'm not a big concert goer, if I'm gonna be honest with you. It's just not really my thing.
The fun police over here. All
No,
right.
I love. Hey, if you love it, definitely do it, but not really my thing.
The king of the concerts, Andrew Hart, is here with us.
Wait, can I just say how Artemi told you that he's too old to be partying in the city? He's 30 years old.
I know.
Younger
I
than
know.
me, and
That's what I
still
said
party.
to him. That's what I said to him. I was like, Artemi. I was like, no, you're not. He was like 3 years ago. Yeah, I'd be right there with you. But like, he's like, now I'm too old. I was like, come on, don't say that about yourself. It's so not true.
And the horse riding story is pretty cool. I'm coming for that trip. I won't ride the horse because I can't even ride a bike. Last time I rode a bike, I fell off, never rode one again.
Oh God.
So I will come watch. But speaking of guys who aren't old either, Igor Shesterkin isn't too old, and he carried this team, Molly, last year. Obviously, he is a major storyline, Vezina Trophy winner. What a season. What a guy. Just, when he speaks English, it's always something cool he says, and it's fun to listen to. He's a guy that you'll get to talk to and get to know maybe a little bit more, but he's got a better backup than our old co-host might have thought of, and Georgiev. So he's got a backup, who's got a lot of experience. This guy's played over 550 games in his career. So, they won't lose sleep for the nights he cannot play. Got to keep him healthy. But Igor Shesterkin, comeback season, you can't get much better than what he did last year. But, with what happened in the offseason, Molly, and the guys that they lost, it's another huge year coming for Igor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think two of the biggest factors that the Rangers' success hinges on is one, the young kids stepping up into bigger roles and taking on more of an offensive responsibility as well as special teams responsibilities, but also Igor Shesterkin having an encore. And that's the toughest thing to do. You're coming off a Vezina Trophy winning season, and one that included a very prolific playoff run. It's a tough act to follow, but I feel like Igor Shesterkin is, I said it when they first brought him up. He's a showman. He's built for the bright lights of MSG. I truly believe that. And I think that even though a lot of their success does hinge on him having an encore season, I think that, it's not something that he's exactly thinking about, that he has to live up to those exact stats last season. But I think to your point about having Halak now instead of Georgiev, I definitely think that will help the team dynamic as well. Obviously, we all know how Ron felt about Georgiev, but I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of Georgiev because he was one of the few players that I did get to interact with in a locker room setting before they all shut down. And he, he's a confident guy. He's a prideful guy. And I think that he's going to do really well in Colorado. Having that defense in front of him is certainly going to help. And being on a reigning Stanley Cup winning team is going to help. But I think that Georgiev is a number one. I really do. And I think that he'll prove that to a lot of people in Colorado this season. I really liked the Halak signing a lot, just because he is a guy that has played the backup role for a good bulk of his career, but he's also been a starter. So I feel like between the experience and just being familiar with the backup roles, he's played with other elite goalies, Carey Price, Tuukka Rask. Like, he knows what it's like to be around elite talent. It's nothing new for him, and it's nothing new to be in a number 2 role. So he's one of the guys that I actually haven't gotten around to talking to one-on-one yet. But I'm looking forward to doing that and just picking his brain on, what he thinks a backup goalie's mentality has to be and those types of things. I think it'll tell us a lot about him as a player and him as a person as well. But yeah, no doubt, huge encore season upcoming for Igor Shesterkin. It's an absolute need. And I'm very excited to see what Halak does in the number 2 role. And even Louis Domingue.
I was going to say, faced him. We just saw you.
He can. Yeah, exactly. Who dominated the headlines with his spicy beef and broccoli story, which I feel like you hate fun if you don't like that story. So he's another guy I didn't get to talk to before he went down, but barring injuries, of course, I think that, because they lost Kincaid too to the Bruins in free agency. So they needed, once those 2 guys left, Igor was the last goalie in the organization with NHL experience. And that's a slippery slope there. So Drury knew he needed to go out and get 2 NHL caliber goalies. And I really think that they did that. And you can't mention Halak without mentioning the fact that he was an absolute Ranger killer before he arrived on Broadway. So he had tremendous numbers against the Rangers, 5 shutouts, I believe. And I was talking to Mika and Chris about it. Chris said, "You can't beat him, sign him." And that was a great quote. But I think that they also said, Mika said that the last guy that he could think of that tormented them like Halak did, he compared it to Artemi Panarin, which, that's pretty good company to be in. And Chris's mind actually went the same way. He was like, I can't think of a player who, tormented us like Halak did. And I was like, well, Mika said Artemi. And he said, yes, Artemi was definitely one of them. So that's pretty good company for Halak to be in, that these Rangers stalwarts think of him as a guy that's just constantly tormented them throughout the years. So
yeah, now you can just hope he could torment opponents and not the Rangers.
Yeah.
Once every 2 weeks or however often he's going to play. And you got to factor in, Igor had the biggest season of his life and also the longest. He rode an entire playoff run. He played more games than he's ever played. You have to think that sets him up nicely for another great season here, because he knows the fatigue factor. He knows he's going to get gassed up. He knows mentally how to get to where he needs to be. And this is going to be another big season for him. I think he's going to win another Vezina. There's my prediction.
Ooh, that's a hot take right there.
Goes back to back. I just think mentally he's going to be there. And as long as he stays healthy. But like you said, you get a guy like Domingue. If he goes down, Domingue becomes your backup. You're in a much better place than you were last season. That's not a question mark, but what entering Tuesday's season opener against the Lightning and what should be a raucous Madison Square Garden? How about that? That was set up perfectly by the schedule gods there. And I assume they did that purposely, of course.
Yeah, of course.
In a Eastern Conference Finals rematch. What is your biggest question mark, Molly, here heading into the season opener Tuesday?
Well, I think for the Rangers now at this point, with the way that the lineup has kind of shaken out, and Gerard Gallant said that the last 2 preseason games, tonight or Wednesday night against Boston, and then the next one is against the Islanders, I think, at the end of the week, that those are going to be the lineups that are going to be the closest to what we can expect to see on opening night. So as of right now, you've got Zach Jones kind of penciled in next to Braden Schneider, but you should definitely go read Larry Brooks's recent article about, he does have a little bit of obstacles in front of him in terms of getting on the power play, and that's his bread and butter. So that's a question mark there that could maybe leave him off the roster, but we'll see.
How dare Larry write about the UMass product and not you? How does that work?
No, I was gonna say, I think I've written way too many words about him. It was about time for Larry to take on some of that. Of course, I'm unbiased, but otherwise, I would say that the 2 top questions on my mind are who the last remaining forwards are going to be. It seems like it's a race to the finish line between guys like Carpenter and Rydell and who else, VC and Hunt. And I guess you could throw Gauthier in there too. Gauthier has had a pretty good camp. But a lot of it is going to come down to numbers. A lot of it is going to be a cap crunch here and how they want to set themselves up going into the season with a cushion heading into the trade deadline so that they could potentially make moves at that point in time as well. So, and Gallant said it, he literally said the words, it's going to be a numbers game. So that could play a major part in it, where they won't be able to just pick the guys that they really want to. It will be a numbers game as well. So we'll see how that ends up shaking up. And then as well as who is going to play on the right wing of the top line. That I feel like was a question coming into camp. And I feel like it's a question that has still yet to be answered during camp. We've seen 4 guys there in that spot. Kakko's gotten a look. Blais has gotten a look. Gaudreau has gotten a look. And now Jimmy Vesey has gotten a look. And obviously Jimmy Vesey is on a PTO. So he's not even under contract. So he is playing for a contract here. And he's made it pretty hard for them not to cut him. He really has. He's got, entering Wednesday's game against Boston, he's got 3 points. He's got a goal, 2 assists. He had like a game-saving play at the end of one of the games. He's had a really, really good camp, and he really hasn't given them any reasons not to sign him. But we all know Gerard Gallant loves Dryden Hunt, and there's no reason not to like Dryden Hunt. Dryden Hunt's a good worker and a hard worker and plays a different style, but it's all very up in the air. And I think there's a good chance Lafreniere could start there for opening night on October 11th, who hasn't gotten a look during camp, but he played there a bit at the start of last season. I just don't think any of those guys have done anything to really snatch up that job. And I think that they don't really know what they're going to do yet. So I'm very curious to see how that ends up playing out, but that's a pretty big question mark for a team that is so top heavy.
You mentioned PTO. I need some PTO. Once this Mets season's over, I'm going to need my own PTO if I could ever get it at some point. All right, Molly, you gave us the big storylines. You talk goalies. We talk locker room. Let's just get to the nitty gritty. Preview the season. Give us a win total. Where does this team finish in the standings?
God, I wasn't ready for this.
Maybe not win total, but where does this team finish? Do they get to the playoffs? Give us your predictions for the season.
I definitely think they'll finish among the top 3 in the Metro. I do think that it should, but also something to point out is they were so lucky with injuries last season, like the luckiest, and that is not something that happens often. And when you look at the lineup on both sides, up front and on the back end, 1 or 2 injuries, and they are very, very close to being a skeleton of a lineup. They really are. So I think that could be a problem if it is something that they run into this season. But if they do have the same kind of luck, Igor Shesterkin has an encore season. Again, it's a lot of things have to go right, but they certainly have the capability of doing it. You know, they're coming off a tremendous season. I feel like the confidence is at an all-time high, especially for a lot of those young guys. Keandre Miller is going to be a problem this season. Braden Schneider is also projected to take another big step. And, you know, it's kind of just going to fall to Lafreniere, Hedl, and Kakko on also taking another big step. But I feel like they're set up to do it. They have the same bones as they did last season. Really, the biggest difference is no Ryan Strome, but they picked up Vincent Trocheck. And I think that could be beneficial for the team, not only on faceoffs, which is great, but also just in the way that the top 6 plays and the way that second line with Panarin and potentially Kravtsov could have a dynamic. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think they should finish in the top 3. I don't know if are we gonna go all the way into playoff predictions? Do
you want to just say they're gonna win the Stanley Cup and get fans ready to run through a brick wall right now? Do you want to say
no? That was Ron's job, and I'm sorry, I'm not here to do that.
Keep it real with us. All right. So
no, I mean, there's definitely, they're in the conversation. They are totally in the conversation. But I think that this is such a tricky season because you're coming in with such high expectations, coming off such a prolific season with such great success. that it's a tough act to live up to. But I think we'll learn a lot about this Rangers team because of that.
I'm gonna say 50 wins, second place in the Metro, and they win the Eastern Conference. I'll bring the fan.
There you go. You can take
wins.
that on. You can take that on.
I just think Igor going through what he had to go through, he's ready for this right now. Again, everything as every sport, it comes down to injuries. You're right. They got so much luck. They didn't have many injuries. They get Sammy Blais back. Hopefully he stays healthy, but obviously injuries are going to play a part.
Yeah.
But I'm saying they go to the finals. I'm not going to say they win because that might be a little crazy. I'll say they win the Eastern Conference. The Garden's rocking again. Andrew Hartz, give us your prediction before Larry Brooks joins us and we get to your questions, which Molly and Larry will answer. Hartz, give us your prediction.
I like Molly's prediction of top 3 in the Metro. I think that makes the most sense. I feel like they have a squad that learned off of last year. It's such a young squad, and guys, it's all about experience in this league. And like you said, they got lucky with injuries. They went through hell against the Penguins. They went through hell against the Hurricanes. And once they got to Tampa Bay, it really was just running on fumes at that point. But my bold prediction is that they're back in a conference finals, and at that point we'll see what happens. I think that Drury has a tight cap to work with, and you think about what he did at the deadline last year, picking up some key pieces in Kopp and Vetrano. But at this point, I like the skeleton that they have here. Now it's just a matter of staying healthy, getting that encore, and if they're able to do that, again, conference final, top 3 in the Metro. Let's do it.
All right, conference final. Molly pleads the fifth on how far they I say they win the East. Well, that was a fun opening segment. We'll be back every Thursday, of course. But joining us next on Up in the Blue Seats, we go to our Hockey Hall of Fame writer, Larry Brooks. Next, me and Hartz talked to some fans at watch parties, and they said their favorite part of the show, sorry, Molly, was when Larry Brooks was on. So we get joined every week by him. He's the New York Post Hall of Fame hockey writer, covering the Rangers and everything NHL at the New York Post. Read his columns at nypost.com and in the newspaper. Follow him on Twitter at NYP_Brooksie. Larry, you guys are back. Larry and Molly, that sounds like a show on Showtime or something. We need to make that happen.
It really could be.
I mean, it really could be. How many years have you been covering the NHL? What is the number at this year?
Well, I started in 76, 77, but there was a 11-year gap where I worked for the Devils. So I'm not good at math, but so
I think that's 45. If you include those years, it looks like 45 years, Larry.
If you say so.
40, Molly, that's negative. You were negative 23 when Larry started.
How lucky am I?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are back and picking your road trips. I'm sure Molly's choosing Vegas and all the fun cities.
Actually, no. Larry is taking Vegas.
Wow.
Molly has got California.
Yeah, but I'm going to Cali for the first time. Very excited about
Larry
that.
at the blackjack tables. How about that? I love to see it. Larry, biggest question mark for this Rangers team heading into the season?
Well, I think overall the biggest question mark is will the team how will the team respond to expectations? And that's an umbrella under which they're playing this year. Last year, there were very few expectations. I don't think anyone quite knew what was coming. There was a new coach, there was a new general manager, slightly new philosophy, more blue collar. So anything they did last year was a surprise. And the run they went on has certainly set a platform for them for this year. But this year's team is now going to have to live up to expectations created by last year's team. And it's a different group. They've lost 3 of their top 6. They're going to have to fill in key spots in their top 6. So I think that's overall. Will this team be immune to the outside expectations that will be attached pretty much from game 1 this year, I think. And secondly, just from a team standpoint, who's going to play up on the top line?
So we just got into that.
Yeah, I mean, who is playing with Kreider and Zibanejad? And secondarily, can Kravtsov keep that spot with Panarin and Trocheck? So you have 2 question marks on the right side on their top 6. And I think that you'd like to have that a little bit more settled. They're doing a lot of experimenting in training camp and through this preseason. So I look at them, and those are the questions. That's really the question: who's going to play in the top six? Will their top six be able to generate enough offense? And will they be a better 5-on-5 team with the puck than they were last year? And their 5-on-5 production was not good last year. It was toward the bottom of the league. It improved somewhat at the trade deadline, but the guys they got at the trade deadline are not here. So it's not. It won't be a bonus if the younger players produce. It's a necessity. It's a necessity for them that Alex Lafreniere and Philip Hedl and Kako and Kravtsov contribute. They're not there as placeholders. So there are questions, but look, they're a strong team. They've got good fiber. I really like their D, and they start out with one of the best 2 or 3 goalies in the NHL, which is their huge advantage. It's their huge edge, but you don't want to leave it all to Igor the way they, for so many years, left it all to Hank. Lundqvist was able to handle it, but they never won, right? I don't think they want to place as much of a burden on Shesterkin this year as they did last year. I don't know if it's fair to expect him to come in with he was in the 940s in save percentage until the final few weeks of the season, and wound up at 935, I think, which is, I think the 3rd best all time for a goalie who had started 50 games. So again, even if he gets to 935, can you expect him to get to 935? So they have to take a little bit of the burden off of Shesterkin. They need to play with the puck more on the other end. They need to be better 5-on-5 offensive team. But I think they come into the season as a solid unit.
You just kind of touched on it. We were talking about it a few minutes ago about the top line and who is going to play in that right wing spot. So it's a good segue into one of our subtext questions from Jonathan Moore. He says the first line right wing is a revolving door. Why? Was Pavel Buchnevich really that hard to replace? And who is the best option, you think, at this point?
Well, Pavel Buchnevich would cost let's say Pavel Buchnevich signed for the same deal in New York if they hadn't traded him as he signed in St. Louis. So it's $5.8 million. Explain to me where the $5.8 million coming out of the Ranger cap.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that Buchnevich could play. Everybody knew that Buchnevich could play up there.
Right.
And I've been thinking about this too. Could they have worked it out? Could they have, not to relitigate the whole matter, but what would they look like with Buchnevich? And well, they had signed actually Barclay Goodrow right before they traded Buchnevich. So if they weren't going to trade Buchnevich, they probably wouldn't have traded for Goodrow. And if you remember, everyone believed that that's exactly the kind of player the Rangers needed, a Barclay Goodrow kind of player. They needed to bring more. They needed to diversify. They were too homogeneous. I mean, we'd gone through that for 2 or 3 years. They were just so homogeneous. And so they needed to bring in more grit, more sandpaper, use every cliche. So you probably wouldn't have Barclay Goodrow, but then you wouldn't have either Hedl or Kako, because you've got to get to 5.8. And then you probably, then you wouldn't have any space under the cap with that 5.8.
So to pay Keandre Miller coming up.
Right. And that's that's on point, because you're not only trying to fit Buchnevich into this year's team, you'd be fitting him into next year's team and in the team 2 years after, where Keandre Miller, Lafreniere are going to be coming up on second contracts. Hedl, if they want to keep him, he's coming up on another contract. So, let's put the Buchnevich issue to rest. Who is the best fit there?
Yeah.
I think probably Lafreniere.
I know, me too.
What strikes me is the fact that they came into training camp, I think, wanting to play Blais up there because of his size, because of his speed, because he brings a little bit of a different element to that line than they've ever had before. Buchnevich was a certain kind of player. When when they got Vetrano, they moved him up there immediately, and Vetrano was a shooter. He is neither Buchnevich nor Vetrano. You know, he is a big guy with some speed who's a forechecker, hits. You'd expect him to be a puck retriever, work the walls and work the dirty areas. But what's interesting to me is that they went away from it so quickly.
I was gonna say 3 days, I think it was.
Right. I think he had one game.
One game.
And so if they were planning on going with him, you'd think that they would have stuck with it a little bit so he'd get more reps. So you know, Mika and Kreider would have more reps with Blais. It doesn't look like it's going to be Blais. You could always plug in Barclay Goodrow, but he's a bottom six player. They signed him to be a bottom six player.
The Rangers are at their best when he's in the bottom six.
Right. And I think they're actually at their best if he's on the fourth line, although you can argue maybe third because there's a little more.
I think fourth line. I think fourth line too.
Yeah. So I mean, I think they're at their best if they can construct a lineup with Goodrow as their fourth line center. I think that's their best team, but they have to be able to fill that spot on at the top. So yes, you could get by with Goodrow for a couple of games, but it doesn't seem to be a solution. Even last year, they had Kakko injured, they didn't have Kravtsov, Blais was out, and Goodrow only played up there 8 games out of 80. So, no one thinks he's the answer up there. Bottom six players are bottom six players for a reason. They have certain abilities, they have certain talents that lend themselves to being bottom six. That's why even, thinking of Jimmy Vesey up there, he's a little more talented, but Jimmy Vesey hasn't been a top 6 player since his second year in New York. He just hasn't been. And, further to that point, he has talked about how he knew after the COVID year in Canada, where he said he described it as just a miserable experience because he was up in Canada by himself, locked down. He said it was just an awful year. But he recognized as a player that he was going to have to reinvent himself as a fourth line player. He even invoked Tyler Mott, saying, look, I know that they really valued what Mott did here, and I think I can be that same kind of player. I think we have a lot of
PK specialist, pesky player.
And can skate. Jimmy Vesey can skate. So here's Jimmy Vesey advertising himself as a fourth line player.
And he's getting the look on the first line today.
No, I'm not sure. I advocated over the summer for the team to start the kid line together. I like them intact. I think they're comfortable with each other, and I think it gives them a really good third line. But I suspect that they're going to have to get off of that. I suspect that Lafreniere is going to play right wing on the top line. And I think, sooner or later, it's going to be his job to keep or not be able to keep. Whether Kravtsov can keep this, the spot with Panarin and Trocheck, I don't know. You might see Kakko up there. And then who is Filipino going to play with? I don't know. So, they have a lot of players, but they are searching for top 6 right wings.
Larry, we'll do 1 or 2 more from the mailbag here. Robert Hanley says, reading Molly, you, and Ethan this preseason, not getting much positive vibe on Kravtsov. Do we think he will get a full year up with the varsity if he continues to be mediocre? And if no, can he be sent to the AHL, or would he go back to the KHL?
I wouldn't leap to too many conclusions off a week and a half of training camp. Different players are doing different things at camp. I'm not sure whether Kravtsov's been told he's trying to acclimate himself to the small rink. He's doing a lot of work with Panarin, late in practices and after practices. I think the question is a little bit premature. I think they're going to give him every chance to hold that spot. They want him to succeed. They need him to succeed. Yeah, they do. Yeah. They need him to succeed. If it doesn't work out, he has to go on waivers, and I suspect somebody would claim him. So
exactly.
And I think they would try and listen. If it doesn't work out with him, I would imagine they would try and trade him first before they go on waivers. and I think they'd probably get something back for him.
Absolutely.
I don't know what that would be, but I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, stamping him as a disappointment. I don't think he's got a great training camp, but again, I'm not sure exactly what his program is.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting training camp to watch because, the first day, basically, the coach said, I don't really care about the first 4 games. I don't care. Practices don't really mean
Yeah, I know. He's so funny. He's so funny like that. I don't care about this at all. It doesn't mean anything.
I do. I think they wanted to get to this point without any injuries, in good health, and then they were going to, like, the last 4 or 5 days,
really hammer it out,
be crystallized. So they may have told Kravtsov, don't worry, I just want you to work on this. Just you work on your own pace. These games don't count. So I wouldn't be hypercritical of Kravtsov.
I agree with you that I don't think that he's had necessarily the most impressive camp. He's not turning heads or anything in the games that he's played or even in scrimmages, practices. But to Larry's point, he has spent a lot of time with Panarin, which is a good sign. And I also feel like for him coming into this camp, especially considering what happened last season, I think the biggest thing for him was to show that he was committed to this team. And he did. He came to New York very early, which was on his account, it seems. And they were very appreciative of that. And that spoke volumes to them. So I think that those are the types of things that he needed to be doing this camp. And I think that that's what he's focused on. So I agree that I think it's a little bit premature to evaluate him because I think that the number one thing for him this camp was showing his commitment, and he's done that. So at the very least, he's showing that he wants to be here and he's committed and that he's, putting his all into the Rangers.
Yeah, I think, that's a good point.
Molly, you close up shop here. Let's get your prediction for the season, Larry. What do you got this year? What we won't say win total yet, but do the Rangers go on another run in the Eastern Finals? Where do they finish in the Metropolitan? Give us your outlook.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the playoffs. Honestly, because
I wouldn't touch it either.
Because tell me what their team is going to be the day after the trade deadline, and then I'll tell you, and tell me what every other team is going to look like the day after the trade deadline, and I will, and I'll have a better idea of whether they'll go on a run or not this year. But I think this is going to be a more challenging season for them than last year. I think they might be a better team, but I don't expect the East to break the way it did last year, where essentially by the middle of December, you knew the 8 teams that were going to be in, teams that were going to be out. And the Rangers essentially had clinched effectively had clinched the playoff spot by Christmas. I don't expect that to happen this year. I think there'll be some challenges for them this year. I think they're a playoff team. I think they're going to be, strong defensively. They have to eliminate some of the mistakes. They have to eliminate the turnovers. They have to create more 5-on-5 without leaving too much on the other end. But I think it's going to be a battle for them this year. I do. I think that with the added responsibility on the younger players, again, there's going to be ups and downs. That's what I expect. I expect guys now who are counted on to go through some hot streaks and then fall off. So I think there'll be a playoff team. I think it'll be a battle. Whether I suppose that Carolina is the best team in the division. So and I don't think the Rangers will be there with them, but I didn't think they would be last year either. And down to the last week of the season, they had a chance to finish first. And Carolina's made some changes. So I think the Rangers are a playoff team. I think they'll be a top 3 team in the division rather than a wild card. But I think it may take but I don't think they'll be comfortably in the playoffs in January
like they were last season.
So I think it's going to be I think there are going to be some challenges ahead for them.
There it is, Molly. He still said top 3. You know, he keeps it real. He keeps it 100. That's why the fans love him. But he still says top 3. So there is positivity there.
And I just give myself a pat on the back that I said the exact same thing.
That's why you guys need,
learning from the best over here.
Yeah. Well, Larry, you'll be back in the locker room. I know Molly's pumped. Are you pumped? You've developed relationships for the last 4 decades. That's like a different aspect to reporting that really takes you inside, what these players are thinking.
Oh, well, listen, the last couple of years, it was not fulfilling. It just was not. And
it's true.
Not a big Zoom guy, huh, Larry?
I'm not a big Zoom guy, but listen, who wants to sit there and have everyone have the same material?
Oh, it's the worst.
You couldn't get, early in camp, I passed Keandre Miller as he was leaving the rink or he was going to the locker room. And I introduced myself to the guy. I had covered him for 2 years. And, I had actually met him the night he was drafted, but I doubt he remembered that.
Yeah.
So, I'm introducing myself to players who I have covered for 2 years without locker room access. The only way you can get to know guys, even minimally, is by having conversations with them.
Yeah.
And it's the fulfilling. It's where you do your work.
Yep.
You develop relationships. You have conversations. It's not question. It's conversation and getting to know a guy and just sitting down next to a guy and asking him how his day was and just discussing life away from the rink. And I've known Mika obviously for a number of years. But the other day, we were when we were in Kingston, he was actually asking me where I lived, and we were just talking about our daily routines, and that was something that you couldn't do for the last couple of years. So I am energized by it. I really am. Maybe in 2 months, I'll get with Zoom. But it's our job. That's
it brings the competitiveness back to what we do as well.
Right.
It's everything.
So it's everything. It's the job I have enjoyed for as you have reminded me for more than 4 decades. So, no, it's fun to go to the rink. It is.
It is.
To go to the rink. Last
it
year,
is.
on the practice. All right, it was okay. I mean, it's always okay to be at the rink, but then you would go and you'd sit in the room, and players would come out and sit at the podium,
regurgitate the same quotes.
Exactly, and personal aren't relaxed up there.
No,
you're not going to ask particularly personal questions,
tough questions.
You're not going to, if you have a thought, you're not going to give it away in a question. So it's a lot of fun going to the rink.
And Larry Brooks and Mollie Walker will have those scoops from inside the ring. My 2 favorite Rangers reporters. Follow Larry on Twitter at NYP_Brooksie. Read his stories in the Post at nypost.com. Larry, thanks for coming back this season. We're glad to have you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Well, as long as the contract is there.
Keep paying. Keep coming back. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks.